The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Florida, Mr. Donalds, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank all the witnesses for being here. Mr. Sarah, in your testimony, you explained that certain types of crypto assets, such as the native tokens of decentralized networks, differ from securities in fundamental ways. Can you explain what a native token of a decentralized network is, and describe why it's fundamentally different than a security?
Yes, thank you for the question. The taxonomy of digital assets is still being worked out, but I think the easiest way to understand this is to first understand what I mean by decentralized networks. As people, we all like to organize in groups, and most of those groups are hierarchical and centralized. Decentralized networks are just another way to organize as a group, but instead of being centralized and hierarchical, they're spread out. And tokens are basically a tool that enables participants in these networks to have economic incentives, and therefore it either incentivizes or can penalize certain types of activities. And the key concept here is that these tokens in decentralized networks are not deriving their value from any specific centralized issuer. They don't even derive their existence from a centralized issuer. So for example, Satoshi, the pseudonymous founder of Bitcoin, disappeared, and Bitcoin has continued to exist and thrive. That couldn't happen in the context of a security, right? If a company goes bankrupt, you can't think about a share of stock persisting after that. So they're fundamentally different.
So let me answer this question. Are all digital assets native tokens of decentralized networks? And what functions and roles do these other types of digital assets serve?
No, I think digital assets encompass a wide range of uses. Hester Peirce, for example, Commissioner Peirce put forth her taxonomy, and there's been other taxonomies. So I think meme coins are different. I think NFTs are different. I think you can also have things like tokenized securities, just a share of stock on blockchain rails, which shouldn't be treated any different than if it was on a piece of paper.
Mr. Warwick, can you describe blockchain uses and applications outside of the crypto ecosystem, such as the tokenizing of real-world assets?
Thank you for your question. I can speak about real-world assets. Was that your question?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So real-world assets are difficult to sometimes transfer or to lend against or to trade. And so the tokenization of real-world assets allows, for example, a piece of real estate can be fractionalized, let's say, into 10 different fractions, and then those 10 owners of that one piece of real estate then can have a reflection of that asset memorialized on the blockchain, and then that title can be transferred from owner to owner, or it can be lent from one owner to another. So that's one example of the tokenization of a real-world asset.
I mean, to simplify it, I would say for people who watch this hearing, is it safe to say that tokenizing real-world assets is essentially a more efficient form of a limited partnership, where you might have a general partner, but then you have a suite of limited partners who have a piece of that investment? Is that fair?
That's exactly. That is another example of a way to tokenize, an investment in a fund. For example, your ownership in that fund could be reflected by a token on the blockchain, and then you could lend against it, or you could transfer it via the blockchain.
Ms. Smith, how would the current accredited investor rule impede retail investing in tokenized securities?
So I'm going to unpack the question a little bit. So retail investors are not accredited investors, so they can't participate in any offerings that are restricted or private placements. Separately, tokenized securities, that market is still developing. So if we're talking about tokenizing public shares, then presumably those would be available to retail investors.
What if we were in a position to tokenize restricted offerings?
If you tokenize restricted offerings, assuming that the token behaved like the actual underlying stock, it would be restricted to retail investors as well.
What's the limiting principle would that create if you have a more efficient way to fund restricted offerings, but retail investors are limited because of the accredited investor rule?
I mean, the restriction would be the accredited investor rule, right? So you would make the offering more efficient, but because the rule which goes to the offering, because it is a securities transaction, retail investors would still not be able to participate.
All right, Chairman, I know I'm over time, and this is one of the reasons why I think the time has now since come to get rid of the accredited investor rule or make some modifications to expand the ability for investors at the retail level to be engaged in all forms of finance. With that, I yield back.